Welcome to Retire with Purpose, a show specifically designed to help you maximize your financial confidence in retirement. Casey Weade is the CEO and Chief Visionary of Howard Bailey Financial, a certified financial planner and Wall Street Journal best-selling author. He's your host on Retire with Purpose.
Hey, I'm Casey Weade, and we believe in retirement strategies that are driven by meaning and purpose. Join us this week and every week as we discuss planning for your best retirement, pinpointing your purpose, building a rock-solid financial plan, and unpacking trending topics that could impact your financial future. Welcome to the show. Welcome to Retire with Purpose, the science of retiring with confidence, the art of living with purpose. This is your host, Casey Weade. Joining me, as he does always, my good friend and co-host, Marshal Johnson, here with me.
Hey.
And we are here to discuss retirement with you. So if you're at retirement, in retirement, near retirement, or you're just seeking that coveted job optional status, you have found yourself a home. We're going to have a wide-ranging discussion, as we always do here on the show. We're going to be hitting on how long to keep those financial records. So what about that tax return from 2002?
Yes.
You know, should you still be holding on to that? We're going to get to that here in a moment. We're also going to be hitting on Social Security filing strategies, and we have some really cool guests coming on the show. We have David Bach, Gene Chatsky, and more. We're going to share some clips of our interviews with these individuals, and we're going to have some gives at the same time. So we'll have some New York Times best-selling books coming your way, so stick around for that. But off the top, we're going to be covering an article that came from our Weekend Reading for Retirees email series. That's an email that goes out every single Friday with 4 articles on trending topics in the retirement planning space, where we not only break those down in easy to digest formats, but also give you our biggest takeaways, all designed to help you make better decisions on your way to and through retirement. You can sign up at retirewithpurpose.com. And while you're there, get a link to this article. We did a full-length discussion on the Retire with Purpose podcast about this article, and the link is in the show notes. This one that we're going to highlight for you comes from Seeking Alpha, and it is titled Retirement: How Much Cash You Should Hold.
Ooh, I love it. You know, this is one of those topics or ideas or concepts that comes up frequently, almost constantly in meetings when we're sitting down with families. You know, we talk about emergency fund and liquidity. It's like, well, you know, how much should I have? Dave Ramsey says this. My mom always told me this. It's a great question, Casey.
Yeah, and I think the first thing we have to start to do here is dissect what cash is. You know, define what is cash exactly. And the article, I think, is a little conflicting when it comes to what cash is. Off the top, the article is saying, well, cash is this. It's your checking account, money market funds, or other cash-like assets. And that's usually an amount equivalent to 6 months of your living costs, or some might say whatever helps you sleep well at night. Now, as the article continues, they kind of deviate from these money market funds, cash-like assets, into riskier asset classes. And that'll be important for us to discuss.
Yeah, because as you've talked about before, you know, we always have to question our sources, right? You know, when we look at an article, it's always helpful to scan to that back page, see if there's any disclosures. You know, where's this information coming from?
Yeah, and we're going to tell you where this information is coming from. But the article is really good, so I want to make sure we don't distract you with that. I think the first thing that's really interesting about this article is talking about the difference between wealth and liquidity, and the goal that individuals have with maintaining liquidity, or, you know, not maintaining too much liquidity. Number one, we want to maintain some liquidity for emergencies. Number two, we want to maximize your long-term returns of your overall portfolio. And essentially, we're talking about the difference between wealth and liquidity. And when you start out in life, I know I was going back and we were talking to my wife and we were talking about this a while back about our first home. You know, on our way out of college and over the first few years,
Sure.
all of our savings, it went to our bank account, basically. You know, it was all in our savings account, our money market account, right? It was all cash. That liquidity was also our net worth, right? That wealth and liquidity at that time in our lives, it was pretty much the same thing.
Yeah.
But over time, you know, our lives get more complex and we start separating these two things.
Yeah, we talk about net worth as our assets minus our liability. So when you purchase that first home, a lot of that liquidity might have been sucked into the home as a down payment. So now we're deviating from that example you gave there.
Well, and I think one of the kind of terrifying and disturbing experiments that the author outlines here is something for you to ponder if you're questioning if you have enough liquidity. He says this. He says, if a kidnapper took one of your children and demanded a ransom payment within 1, 24, 48, or 72 hours, how large of a ransom payment would you be able to generate in a couple of days, a few days? Now, that's real liquidity. That's cash. When it comes to our financial planning process, that's what we would define as liquidity. How much cash can you get your hands on in a matter of days?
Safely. That's what I add to that, safely. Oftentimes we have individuals that confuse marketability of their stocks and their securities. As you mentioned with a home, yeah, you can sell a home anytime. Right, it's marketable, but the process may be a longer process than the ransom the kidnappers want.
Exactly. And right now, I think it's an important discussion because individuals are frustrated. You might be frustrated with the return that you're getting on your cash, on your money market, on your checking, savings accounts. It's like, geez, they might as well go ahead and start charging me for this because I'm not making a dime because interest rates are just so low.
Well, they might start doing that too.
Well, and they might. And you are getting charged in a way because of inflation. If you're only making 0.5%, but inflation is running 2%, then you're losing 1.5% safely.
Yeah, every year.
Yeah.
Safely and losing to inflation.
Now, I think what's really helpful in this article is not just this discussion around liquidity, but it's also having a discussion about all the different ways that you can maintain liquidity, better ways for you to get liquidity to your portfolio outside of just maintaining a large bank balance. And the first one is an interesting one, liquidity through your brokerage account.
Yeah, I think when I hear that initially, it's a little bit like you think of margin. You know, when somebody has a brokerage account at TD, Schwab, Fidelity, you can often apply for margin, which would allow you to essentially borrow or have some credit based upon the deposits in that account.
And those interest rates can be relatively high at times. And so I think you want to exercise caution with these first couple solutions that are outlined in the article. Number one, borrowing against your brokerage account, using margin, a liquidity line within your brokerage account. And number two, using an equity line of credit. Or most often you think of this as a HELOC, a home equity line of credit. And we use ours. You know, I really like a home equity line of credit. It does offer additional liquidity and additional flexibility, but it should not by any means be your only source, because that is not a guaranteed line of credit. That can be cut off by the bank. And that happened to a lot of individuals that had home equity lines of credit back during the financial crisis, and they froze those lines of credit. Right. So during a crisis, you may not have access to the liquidity that you thought you had access to.
Yeah, even if it's an open line of credit, a lot of people will assume, hey, I've got $50,000 or $150,000 of line of credit. Those lines can be closed during times of crisis.
And basic solution number 3 outlined in the Seeking Alpha article is one that I find often overlooked by the families that we work with. You might have an old life insurance policy that you've been funding for the last 20 years. Maybe grandma and grandpa left it to you. And you think of that just as a life insurance policy, but you may have significant cash value, $10,000, $50,000, $100,000, and you can utilize those dollars. You may be able to borrow against those to free up some extra cash and utilize it for other purposes.
Yeah, and it may take longer than in 24 hours, right, or 72 hours, but you have cash available that can be exercised in a time of need.
And this is where I get my liquidity. Now, the article outlines whole life insurance policies. You know, in your whole life policy, you're probably earning a net 2 to 4%, heck of a lot better than what you're getting at the bank.
Well, wait. You know, a lot of times we say, oh, the whole life is paying 5.5%.
Yeah, well, that's gross, not net, right? Okay. There's expenses to cover that death benefit inside of your life insurance policy. You know, I use an indexed universal life policy for our liquidity. I know we can go access that cash at any time. There aren't any surrender charges. We overfunded it. That means it's liquid from day one, and we have the opportunity to make a much bigger return than we could make in a whole life policy. It's still the same premise, whether it's a whole life policy or an indexed universal life policy. Just don't overlook those unique tools as higher yield ways to store cash.
Right. In life insurance essentially is a separate asset class, and we just have to include that in the 4 buckets, the 4 tax buckets that are available.
Now, the author makes a transition here into what he is selling, right? And this author is selling ultimately a newsletter, a dividend newsletter called High Dividend Opportunities. There's nothing wrong with selling anything or selling a dividend newsletter, but recognize your source courses. They're selling a newsletter that costs you anywhere from $40 to $65 a month. And so they're going to promote dividend investing in this article. They outline preferred stocks. They outline a favorite, what he calls a hybrid, Ares Capital, ARCC. And he also recommends dividend stocks such as Altria. If we look at ARCC, it has lost 83%.
Whoa. Hold on. That's not how he set it up, right? He set it up as, hey, this is paying 8.8%, well in excess of yield and inflation by holding this cash-like position. But it says it may decline in value.
Not only may it decline in value, it's lost 83% over a 24-month period. Altria lost about 30% over a 24-month period.
But wait, that yield is supposed to cushion the impact of a potential decline.
Well, it would, but how much, right? If you have 16% dividends over a 2-year period, which over that period of time, dividends were cut anyways, so it didn't get 16% during that decline in value, but it didn't overcome the 80% loss in value.
Wow.
And this takes me back to a recent discussion I had with a friend of mine who serves on a board of a local school. And this local school, private school, they have some additional cash. There's an advisor on the board, a broker that is on that board as well. And my friend came to me and said, well, he sat in a meeting, a Zoom meeting the other day, where this other broker that's on the board is trying to get the school to invest their excess cash. I go, okay, well, how much excess cash? Well, they've got about $100,000 in excess cash. I said, well, that's their emergency fund. You can't take risk with that. He said, well, they're proposing this BlackRock portfolio. I said, that's risk. First of all, tell me this. Why do you think you carry those cash balances? What's the reason? He said, well, it's not emergencies. It's really because if we see a good opportunity in the real estate market, we want to go out and we want to buy a property to expand the school.
Oh, okay.
I said, when do you think those good opportunities will come when it comes to real estate? Do you think it's going to happen during those periods of time when the market's going up or flat? No, probably not. You're going to need that cash when it's depressed in value. Then you will not have access to that liquidity that you thought you had.
Right. So really defining what liquidity means, and when times of crisis rise their head, there's going to be challenges with some of these ideas of liquidity.
Yeah, and the article concludes with this, saying the only real basis for such a decision is the desire to maintain liquidity to deal with a financial emergency. And that is not the only reason to maintain liquidity. It is not only for emergencies, but it's also for opportunities. Right. It's what Marshall often refers to as dry powder.
Dry powder.
You need to have some dry powder to take advantage of those opportunities that'll come along. And I think there's different types of investors, different types of individuals should have different types of cash balances. If you're an average accumulator on your way to retirement, just trying to take care of the kids and get by and save in your 401k, then it's probably 3 to 6 months. It's probably that traditional rule of liquidity, 3 to 6 months of your expenses, somewhere safe and liquid you can access in case of emergency. If you're your average retiree, I like to see you carry 1 to 2 years of cash balances, liquidity in case of emergencies, because you can't just slap it on your HELOC and pay it off over time. If you're a lifestyle investor, like some of our past podcast guests who often get presented with very unique investment opportunities in the private equity market or real estate market, you might want to keep a lot of dry powder on the sidelines, 2, maybe even 5 years worth of your expenses liquid and safe in case you need access to those things. We'll walk you through all the different opportunities that are out there. We'll walk you through all the different places that you can store that cash to increase your returns and more than keep up with inflation. If you give us a call right now, we're offering a complimentary financial review. You can meet with an independent financial advisor on our team, either in person or through a video meeting from the comfort of your home, and we'll help you determine not just how to manage your liquidity, but how to manage other retirement pitfalls like inflation and healthcare emergencies, rising taxes. Give us a call right now or text CONSULT to 866-482-9559, 866-482-9559. We'll be right back after the short break with questions from you.
You're listening to Retire with Purpose, hosted by Casey Weade and Marshall Johnson. This is Retire with Purpose, hosted by Casey Weade and Marshall Johnson.
Welcome back to Retire with Purpose, the science of retiring with confidence, the art of living with purpose. This is your host, Casey Weade, and my good friend and co-host, Marshall Johnson, here with me to answer questions from you. So every week, we get questions submitted to us at retirewithpurpose.com and via email and via Facebook, and all types of different questions come our way. And there's some really good questions that come our way, and we like to highlight some of those here for you. If you have questions that you'd like to get answers to that are financially related, retirement related, maybe RMD related, tax deferred related, you just have any type of financial question, maybe anything that's keeping you up at night, go on over to retirewithpurpose.com and submit your question right there in the bottom right-hand corner of that screen. It says, Ask Casey a Question. You could also just text us a question right now at 866-482-9559, 866-482-9559. We'll get you an answer to that question. And if you'd like to be featured here on the show, we'll give you that opportunity. That's what we did with Jennifer. Jennifer says, I'm in my early 50s and in what you might call the constrained category of retirement readiness. I still want to make saving and planning for retirement a priority, but how can I balance that with also taking time to enjoy life today?
Ooh, great question, Jennifer. One thing that I would suggest, I noticed you said I'm in the constrained category. So to me, when somebody comes in and has a similar sort of mindset, I would really want to do a deep dive into your spending and really try to understand. I think it sounds kind of basic for somebody to say that. Well, look at your spending and see where you can squeeze out a few extra dollars. But Tim Ferriss, recently we highlighted an article he wrote about single-ply toilet paper, which is a great article if you want to Google that. But in the process of that article, he talked about something he does called a past year review. And it links to another blog post that he did about looking at his spending from the previous year. And really what you're trying to do is you get clear on, number one, where you're spending, and number two, the levers that you have in your life that you can pull and look at those areas where you spent money that really made a significant impact in your life today. And I think that's what you're alluding to. Hey, I want to save for the future, but also I want to enjoy life today. Well, what does that truly mean? You have to get very clear on what that means to you and how much you're spending in that area. And then you can more precisely allocate these levers, and you can pull this one and push this one back, and maybe you can move some of the spending from one category to another and still free up the money to be saving for your future.
Well, if you want to listen, Jennifer, to that full-length discussion on toilet paper, you can check out episode number 190 of the Retire with Purpose podcast. Also get a link to the article that'll kind of walk you through some good exercises to figure this out for yourself. I would also challenge you with this. Is it about the money? Where are you finding happiness? We've had many articles over time that have shared that money doesn't bring happiness after a certain point. You have to make sure that you're happy today, because more money may not bring you any more happiness. It may not be all about the money. There may be other ways to bring happiness into your life. One of those might be to never retire. What if you decide today, maybe you hate your job, you don't like working? What if the transition was, why don't I go find a job that I really enjoy, and then I'll always have the ability to work. So I don't have to retire at 65. I could work till I'm 75 or 85 because I really love what I'm doing. That means you don't have to save quite as much today. Our next question comes to us from Arnold, and Arnold says, I need to decide whether to take a full pension or a lesser amount with survivor benefits. What's the best way to understand the pros and cons of my options?
Deep dive. You got to do a deep dive here, Arnold. We just did this for a family earlier this week where I sat down and we did a deep dive understanding his pension options. And when you're presented with these, it's a litany of choices, but they can be very simplified and boiled down to pros and cons. We in this conversation that I had, we wanted to understand the pension assets versus the IRA assets and the amount of income that was being generated from the pension versus the amount of income that they were going to eventually need from their retirement funds. Now, it's going to be different for every family because you may have a pension and a lot of money saved in a 401k, but if you only have that pension, you need to make sure you're making very calculated decisions. And Casey, we talk about this a lot. Life expectancy comes into play, control of the assets, flexibility. How much flexibility do you need in the future? There's pros and cons to these different strategies. But ultimately, if you're worried about survivor benefits, we have to understand that ages, is there a difference in ages between the spouses? Do they have longevity in the genes? We have to solve for the greatest area of need or concern first and then work backwards.
And I would encourage you to check out episode of the Retire with Purpose podcast, number 54, where we walk through my Kiplinger article where I talk about how to make the pension decision, the pros and cons of the joint and survivor option, the single option. I walk you through all those different aspects. And one of the things that you may not be thinking about yet, so this might jog you into thinking in the right direction, is I had a local aerospace engineer couple that I worked with a couple of years ago, and they had a similar option. They had the single life pension, the joint life pension, and we said, let's look at solving this in a different way. They wanted that joint and survivor pension. They wanted to make sure it was going to be there for both of their lives. And we said, well, if we look at the pension today, you're spending, say, $1,000 a month every single month for the rest of your life on essentially life insurance. That's insurance to make sure if you pass away, that pension continues on for the surviving spouse. And when you're 65, it costs $1,000 a month, when you might need $1 million in a lump sum to replace that pension. And when you're 85, now you only need maybe $150,000 in order to replace that pension based on your life expectancy, but you're still spending $1,000 a month. So what we did is we laddered life insurance policies. We took the single life option, and every 5 to 10 years, one of those life insurance policies expires. Their costs decrease, which in turn makes it so they're actually getting more income year after year. It's kind of like getting inflation adjustments, and they can also use those life insurance policies while they're alive to solve for long-term care needs. And if they both pass away tomorrow, then there's still a legacy to be left behind tax-free to their heirs.
Right. And that's one of the primary concerns with the pension is, if you both die, then that asset is really gone. So trying to understand, is it important to have more control, flexibility there? I think you make a great point, Casey, with trying to leverage life insurance, because the big challenge is right at the start of that pension for the first 5, 10, 15 years. Once you get through that window, those needs start to go away.
When if you're trying to make this decision, a pension decision right now, maybe you have a pension lump sum or a joint and survivor single, you're trying to decipher the best option for yourself, give us a call, 866-482-9559, 866-482-9559.
Next up, we've got Carl. Carl says, Casey, I've calculated that my wife will collect a larger Social Security benefit if it is based on my earnings instead of her own. When should she file?
Well, Carl, I cannot answer that question. And this is important to understand. I've seen many boards online where individuals will ask a question like this, and you've got an expert that comes on and says, oh, well, you need to go ahead and defer yours, Carl, and go ahead and file for hers. And that is a stock response. And I think for many people, that is the best answer, because you're going to take the smaller of those two. You're going to go ahead and get that income today that covers your expenses, defer the larger of the two for the male, which is most likely not going to live as long as the female, which means the female is going to have a larger amount that continues on for their lifetime, being your Social Security amount. However, there's a lot of considerations here. Who's in better health? What are your ages? What are your actual income needs? If you don't need the income, then don't file at all.
Sure.
What about tax planning? Do you have a bunch of your assets tied away in tax-deferred retirement accounts, and then you're going to get hit with these huge RMDs in the future that bump you into higher tax brackets, make more of your Social Security become taxable? You get hit with Medicare premium penalties. Maybe we need to not file any Social Security and do some Roth conversions on the way. And I'll throw this fact out there for you, Carl, is that now there's something called a deemed filing rule that applies to everyone. Okay, so it used to be you had a choice on whether you have your spouse take your benefit or her benefit. Deemed filing rule says that by default, when she goes to file, it's as if she filed for both of those benefits simultaneously, and she's automatically going to get the larger of those two, which in this case, as you said, would be your own.
Yeah, so many things to consider, Casey, when it comes to Social Security, pension, and it's not as easy. We get these isolated questions sometimes to say, hey, when should I file? But it's It really depends. It really depends, and you have to run the numbers. And sometimes I think it's great to write down all these questions, all the things that, Casey, you just lined out. Write down all these questions and have a conversation with the Social Security Administration and look at the different numbers and try to find a solution. Oftentimes I talk about how there's the math and the science, and we can give you all the math and the science, but there's the emotional side to it. Money means very different things to different individuals. And as you alluded to, people have different income concerns and they have different fears. If a family's really worried about outliving their savings, well, then you really need to maximize that Social Security decision because that's the best form of longevity insurance. But if you've got a family that says, hey, we're not going to live past 85, then maybe it's not as important to maximize that Social Security. So a lot of considerations. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone and call Social Security. I know a lot of people say, well, I was on hold for half an hour, but there's some really good resources over there, and you have to ask the questions to get the answers.
Well, and the first step here is to get a Social Security analysis, a basic Social Security analysis that says, hey, if you file this way, you'll maximize your Social Security benefits. If you'd like to get a complimentary analysis, just give us a call right now at 866-482-9559, 866-482-9559. We'll send you out a complimentary Social Security analysis. And if you have more complex questions, maybe you're ready for a total financial review, we have an opportunity to pick up a complimentary financial review right now where you can meet with an independent financial advisor on our team, either in person or through a video meeting from the comfort of your home. And we'll help you determine how prepared you are to handle all retirement has to throw at you, from inflation to healthcare to stock market crashes, rising taxes. In short, we're here to take the guesswork out of financial planning for you. It can take just 30 minutes. So give us a call right now or text CONSULT to 866-482-9559, 866-482-9559. We'll be right back after this short break.
You're listening to Retire with Purpose, hosted by Casey Weade and Marshall Johnson. This is Retire with Purpose, hosted by Casey Weade and Marshall Johnson.
Welcome back to Retire with Purpose, the science of retiring with confidence, the art of living with purpose. This is your host, Casey Weade. Joining me, my good friend and co-host, Marshall Johnson, and some other very special guests. Today, we're highlighting women in retirement because March is Women's History Month, and we're going to take some time to reflect on the many contributions women lend to our society. It's the perfect opportunity to also take a deep dive into the unique financial challenges women face and how we can help them better prepare for a confident and secure retirement. We've featured several guest experts on the Retire with Purpose podcast who provided critical insight on the reality of retirement planning for women, why women can oftentimes outperform men in making investment decisions, and just overall why it's so important for women to be involved in the financial planning process. We'll also be including some giveaways to go along with these discussions and guests. So if you find the information shared here insightful and you want to maximize your financial future, stick around to find out how to get these valuable tools. You can check out all of these featured episodes in full at retirewithpurpose.com. Now let's get started with our first guest. Our first guest feature is Meredith Jones from episode number 158. Meredith is an internationally recognized researcher, writer, and speaker on behavioral finance, alternative investments, and hedge funds. Her book, Women of the Street: Why Female Money Managers Generate Higher Returns, took an in-depth look at how women invest differently than men. Meredith joined us on the podcast for an insightful discussion on the unique perspective women can provide to the investment planning world. And she's going to kick us off with a little discussion on the downside of being overconfident in your investment decisions and how women are able to balance that emotion out.
For example, there's been a lot of studies that show that women tend to be less confident investors. And while you would think that would be a bad thing too, it actually ends up being a good thing, because there was a study of about 35,000 brokerage accounts, and they looked at men versus women. And what they found was that the men had much higher portfolio turnover. They sold and bought stocks a lot more. And when they traced that back, what they found was that that was because the men were more confident in their decisions. And when you're confident, You're positive that when you're buying, you're doing the right thing, and you're positive when you're selling, you're doing the right thing. And so that tends to lead you to do more of that. And one of the things that can erode your investment performance more than anything else is over trading, because you just have those transaction costs, you miss out on gains, you react emotionally, and women just don't have that. And so there's not any one behavioral factor I can point to, but when you put them all together in the enchilada of the way that women approach money and investing, it ends up being really very conducive to being a successful long-term investor.
What is it about enchiladas?
I don't know. It sounded fantastic.
Whole enchilada.
Yeah.
But the enchilada, it's just beef and cheese.
Well,
there's not that much to an enchilada.
But the sauce, it's all about the sauce, though. You know, you got different flavors.
Well, let's not get off track here.
Okay.
But I wanted to know what your thoughts are on this. I know when I go back and I think about, I often get the question, what are the biggest investment mistakes you've seen people make over your lifetime?
Yeah, sure.
And all the thousands of people we've worked with, it always kind of resorts back to men for myself. If I think about the penny stock traders, the day traders, the individuals that were buying, high flyers, options trading, a lot of the most devastating financial consequences I've seen have been those that have been enacted by men rather than their female counterpart.
Yeah, I tried to think back when we had this discussion, and I can think of maybe one instance where a female investor made a very emotional, poor decision, but 99% of the time it's men that we encounter that are making these overconfident, and she's right, it's all about confidence. Well, I know the market's going to crash this year, so I want to go to cash, those sorts of decisions.
Yeah, and Meredith's book and her research applies to men and women. If you want to become a better portfolio manager, a better money manager, we've got a special offer for you today. We partnered up with Meredith Jones to offer her book, Women of the Street, Why Female Money Managers Generate Higher Returns and How You Can Too. It takes an in-depth look at the behavioral and biological investment research behind why women think differently about investing and why they might have a money management edge. Meredith generously sent us over a box of books, and we're going to give them away until they're all gone. Call now or text WOMEN to 866-482-9559, 866-482-9559 to claim your complimentary copy of Women of the Street. Next up, we want to share a conversation we had with David Bach, the legendary David Bach from episode number 17. David is a 10 times New York Times bestselling author, national speaker, and co-founder of one of the largest and fast-growing registered investment advisory firms in the country. He's lent his knowledge and experience on how to build financial confidence to national media outlets, seminar groups, podcasts over the last 2 decades. And in doing so, he's made it a mission to also inspire 1 million women to be smarter with money. David joined us on the podcast to discuss one of his best-selling books, Smart Women Finish Rich, and the reality of why retirement planning is so critical for women to be involved in. We're going to share a clip here where David shares with us why women need to be involved in the financial and the retirement planning process.
When you work on your finances as a team, when you have goals and dreams based on your values, when you do financial planning together, you stay married and you stay happy and you have a purpose bigger than just yourself. So what I teach is that, and it's the beginning of the book, I have these 17 things you need to know about your money, where it all is, everything, where's the will, where's the insurance, where's the 401k plans, where are the IRA accounts, what are these things earning? You need to know this before you go through a divorce or before you go through widowhood. And so I always say to women, look, if you're married, what do you need to know about the money? The answer is everything, right? Literally the quiz in the beginning of Smart Women Finish Rich was a 17-question quiz. It's called the Financial Knowledge Quiz. I'm like, you need to know everything in here. Now, if you're single, what do you need to know and do? You need to do everything in here, right? So the best way to protect yourself financially is not delegate your financial life to another man in your life.
And if you'd like to get that list of 17 things you need to know about your money and take that 17-question quiz, we have a special offer for you today. We partnered up with David Bach to offer his New York Times best-selling book, Smart Women Finish Rich, free to you right now. This book addresses the new financial concerns and opportunities for today's women and walks you through how to gain confidence, clarity, and control of your financial future. David generously sent us over a box of these books, and we're going to give them away until they're all gone. Call now or text SMART SMART to 866-482-9559, 866-482-9559 to claim your free copy of Smart Women Finish Rich. Next up, we're going to be sharing a clip from episode number 94 with Kathleen Reel. This is one of those episodes that really sticks with me. There were a lot of powerful takeaways that I had from my conversation with Dr. Reel. After Kathleen's late husband passed away, she set out on this journey to help empower widows, as well as the advisors who work for them. She's the author of Moving Forward on Your Own, a financial guidebook for widows. Unfortunately, we've probably given that book away more than any other book internally here. And she joined us on the podcast to discuss how profound loss affects our decision making and the common mistakes that get so many financial advisors fired after the death of a husband. Kathleen shares with us here the biggest reason that widows leave their husband's financial advisor.
Research that 70% of all widows fire the advisor if they were with their husband before his death. And I think that often is because there was not really a relationship with the wife. It was mainly, in fact, one gal said, my husband got his hot tips on the golf course with our financial advisor. She had seen him one time only when they first met, and then he just dealt with the husband. He didn't bring her in on the conversation.
We demand a woman's presence when we're working with a couple. We want to see both of you show up in our office because it's a team effort. You're married. It should be a team when it comes to everything you do, especially when it comes to your financial plan. We've got a special offer today. We want to give away Kathleen Reel's book, and that is titled, again, Moving Forward on Your Own, a financial guidebook for widows. So maybe you're not a widow, but maybe you know someone who could use this information. They're struggling with the finances and getting it together after the loss of a loved one. My mother-in-law really got a lot of value out of this book, along with a lot of our other clients. So if you know someone or you could get value out of this, please give us a call right now. Call us or text forward to 866-482-9559, 866-482-9559. We'll send you out Moving Forward on Your Own. Lastly, when we want to feature Jean Chatzky, who was our guest from episode number 61. Jean is the financial editor for NBC's Today Show, and she has interviewed some of the brightest minds in the fields. Jean joined us on the podcast to share the importance of taking a team approach when it comes to both health and wealth and the new and unique issues surrounding women and money. Here, she addresses excuses women make about managing their finances.
I don't know enough. I don't have time. Nobody taught me how to do this. There's so many different excuses. And the thing that we have to recognize is that they are all valid excuses. They're not going anywhere. But not stepping up and managing your money is not really an option anymore, because we are going to outlive the men in our lives in most cases. We've got children that we're responsible for in some cases, ourselves that we're responsible for, older parents that we're responsible for. And we need to understand how to do this and be doing it before a crisis hits, because it's a much better position to be in rather than having to learn all of these skills on the fly.
If you're ready to step up and take managing your money to the next level, we have a special offer for you today. We're offering a complimentary financial review to you right now. You will meet with an independent advisor on our team, either in person or through a video meeting from the comfort of your home, and we'll help you determine how prepared you are to handle whatever retirement throws at you. Healthcare, stock market crashes, rising taxes, inflation. In short, we'll take the guesswork out of financial planning for you. It can take just 30 minutes. So call or text consult to 866-482-9559 right now. We're offering a complimentary financial review at no obligation. 866-482-9559, 866-482-9559. Stick around, because after the break, we're going to tell you if you should still be holding on to that old tax return or throwing it in the shredder.
First-time callers are eligible to receive one in-stock book per request. Limit one book per week per household, up to 3 books per calendar year. See full terms at howardbailey.com/terms. You're listening to Retire with Purpose, hosted by Casey Weade and Marshall Johnson. This is Retire with Purpose, hosted by Casey Weade and Marshall Johnson.
Welcome back to Retire with Purpose, the science of retiring with confidence, the art of living with purpose. This is your host, Casey Weade. Joining me, my good friend and co-host, Marshall Johnson. And we're going to be sharing an article from our weekend reading for retirees email series. That's one email that goes out every single Friday with 4 topics, 4 articles on trending topics in the retirement planning space, all designed to keep you up to date on the latest income strategies, the latest tax strategies, the latest estate planning strategies, and so much more, so you can make better decisions about your finances in retirement or on the way to retirement. You can sign up at retirewithpurpose.com. First name and email will get you started. We're sharing an article with you now from that series that came to us from the Wall Street Journal. It is titled Declutter the Filing Cabinet, What to Save, Move to the Cloud, or Shred.
Yes, I think weather's warming up. The sun is starting to shine. It's time to do that spring cleaning. And Casey, we get this question a lot. How long do I need to keep these statements? How long should I keep my tax return? You know, I think a lot of us can envision that filing cabinet somewhere in our house that needs to be cleaned out.
And we're all a little subject to procrastination, right?
Especially with that stuff.
I know I want to clean the garage, and I'm really struggling just getting myself out there to take care of a couple items I want to take care of in the garage. And when it comes to estate planning organization, that is even further down on the list of things that I want to take care of. But these are more important than cleaning the garage. You know, organizing your finances is not just important for you, but it's going to be even more important to the survivors that you leave here behind.
I mean, time and time again, we're getting conversations about mom and dad passing away, and the kids had to spend hours and days, and
or
weeks,
even years, trying to really figure out where the money is and who it should go to. You know, so and a lot of this comes down to figuring out what you should be keeping, right? And what's kind of interesting today is it's not just about what you should be keeping in the file cabinet versus what should be shred. But there's another element that we have today. What should you also be moving to the cloud? So should you scan and save it in the cloud? Should you toss it in the shredder? Should you keep it in your filing cabinet? Well, it depends. And it starts with the tax return. You know, we're all getting our taxes done right now. And you're looking, I know for me, I'm going back and I'm putting that tax return back in my file drawer and I'm going, wow. I'm really accumulating a lot of paper here. I've got filing cabinet after filing cabinet full of tax returns, and I don't get rid of them. You know, the article's experts say that you should, and the IRS says this, right? This is directly from the IRS saying that you can shred your tax return 3 years from the date that it was originally filed. I still haven't.
That would make me uncomfortable.
I haven't gotten rid of any of my tax returns ever. I think I'll have a 20-year rule. You know, when we get out to year 20, I'll start recycling.
Well, I went so far as to look it up on the website, right? So they say keep records for 3 years if situations 4, 5, and 6 do not apply to you. Okay, well, let's look at 4, 5, and 6.
That's the problem.
So number 4, keep records for 6 years if you did not report income that you should have reported. Number 5 here is keep records indefinitely if you did not file a return. Or number 6, keep records indefinitely if you file a fraudulent return. Holy smokes. Do you know if they published that?
Do you know if you filed a fraudulent return? It could have been a mistake. I mean, if you've made improvements to your home and you rent it out, it's wise to keep all the records of all the repairs, new appliances, so you can determine your cost basis when you sell the property. I just think, given all the exceptions here and limitations, I'm not comfortable shredding my tax return after 3 years. Those are documents I would recommend you keep for at least 5 years, if not 10 or 15 years. I think those records have they become very valuable to me. Even to just give myself some perspective. I'll go back and pull a return from 10 years ago, and I'm like, oh, well, it has gotten a little bit more complex over time, right? I need to do this, or look look at how good a job I did with this, or where I made a mistake here, and learn from those things. I think there's value in just going back and spending some time in your old tax returns. Maybe that makes me weird.
Yeah, that you and I could really get into that, but a lot of people won't. But I think it's important to kind of keep those tax returns, and especially in the situation where we've dealt with widows who are now filing taxes maybe for the first time or the second time, and going back to those old returns and saying, okay, this is what it was like when it was married filing jointly. These are the things you've done before, and it helps give us clues to the future, especially if you're using a new CPA or a new tax preparer, or you've never had a tax preparer. It's helpful to go back to last year's returns to know where to start for this year's return.
And I think some of the most valuable insights here in this article, they came in the estate planning section, because in estate planning documents, boy, they can just pile up. And especially if you continue to update those over time, it just continues to stack copy on top of copy. And the article shares the only copy, and this is the most interesting part, right? The only document that absolutely has to be a physical copy from your estate planning documents is your will.
Yes.
If you don't have the physical one, there could be a lot of hoops to jump through in court to prove that the copy is valid, because a will is considered by the courts to be revoked if it's torn up or burned. And if you only have a digital copy of your parents' will, you have to prove that they didn't revoke the original by destroying it. You can only imagine how challenging that could be.
Yeah, this goes back to my childhood. There was a movie, 1990, I just looked it up, 1990, Daddy's Dying, Who's Got the Will, with Beau Bridges and Beverly D'Angelo. That was a movie where the will had been destroyed or they couldn't find it. If you can't produce that original copy, it's as if that will did not exist.
Look at you. Now, this one, I think I've made this mistake. So when you update your estate planning documents, you can usually destroy the old versions,
the old ones,
except they don't recommend you get rid of your old revocable trusts, because your trust can be amended time and time again. You make amendments over time, and the article recommends, the family law attorney that's cited in here recommends that you keep prior versions to show exactly what has been changed over time. Multiple versions might show a family member has actually even been written out over time, and you can draw conclusions on why that might be. I've always eliminated those old versions of my revocable trust. But now moving forward, I might have learned something here. I might start retaining all of those so you can see the evolution of the document over time. There could be value there, I suppose.
And they make the mention that, a lot of attorneys' offices will keep signed documents as well, but don't rely on that. Make sure you have a copy, the attorney has a copy, but also maybe your power of attorney or one of your kids has a copy of that, to make sure that if one gets lost or destroyed, then somebody else has got a valid copy.
I think that's the most important thing that's not really focused in on here, is making sure that your beneficiaries know where these documents
know where to
are.
find it. Yeah.
If something happens to you tomorrow, who will be able to access your bank accounts? Who will be able to access your estate planning documents, your investment statements, even your utilities online, your Social Security website? I mean, how are they going to be able to facilitate and find all of those passwords, usernames, documents? You need to make sure that those things are communicated to your loved ones before it happens.
You make an interesting point about bills. I think a lot of people will keep utility bills and bills that they paid year over year and year, and they just pile up. And in this article, they say professional organizers and lawyers say there's usually no reason to keep physical copies of utility bills or financial statements anymore, since those are usually available online. But banks are legally obligated to only keep them for a little bit. So there may be reasons why you want to keep some of those year-end statements.
I am really guilty of keeping an incredible amount of receipts. Actually, I brought them into the office this morning, and Marshal's looking at them right now. I got a bag full of probably.
I thought there was food in there.
Well, there's food and receipts.
Oh, okay.
I needed to get organized, so I brought it all into the office, and now I'm going to take all of those receipts. I'm going to organize them, and I'm going to put them in my 2020 file and seal them, and then I'm going to set those aside. My dad did this to me, where he kept every single receipt. Said that I had to keep every single receipt indefinitely, so I have, and I've kept them relatively organized. I have, at least 15 years, worth of receipts that I've sealed in boxes over the years, and they're really taking up a lot of space. I had a tax attorney a while back that I was working with. He was working with my wife and I, and he looked over at my wife. He said, he keeps every single receipt, doesn't he?
Oh, geez.
And I'm like, yeah, I do. If I go out to eat and it's $10, I still have that receipt, because I just don't know. And while he's making fun of me for doing it, I don't see the problem in doing it. And so again, when it comes to retaining documentation, whether it's receipts or bills or estate planning and documents, tax documents, I don't know why you don't just keep them. I mean, it doesn't take up that much space.
Right.
Just keep the documents.
Well, and if it does take up that much space, or you're concerned about the clutter, looking at some of the cloud-based services, looking at some of the programs that you can utilize to store things digitally in a cloud, encrypted, they make a mention here of certain documents that you could store, a physical copy, you could have a digital copy, and then you could have one in the cloud in case, the digital copy was ruined for some reason. You put some on a hard drive, you put some in a filing cabinet or a fireplace. They make mention of that too. Fireproof safe or filing system.
Yeah, and I like it. One on the computer, an external hard drive, and then a cloud-based service. And there's some that you absolutely have to keep all the time. I think that's important to recognize.
Yes.
Always, perpetually keep those vital and legal records, your birth and death certificates, your marriage licenses, adoption papers, military service records, proprietary deeds, car titles, social security cards, professional licenses, and so much more. So make sure you're keeping track of these things. If you're kind of questioning that for yourself, what you should be storing digitally, etc., or you're looking for those services, Apple iCloud, Google Drive, Microsoft OneDrive, making sure you have two-factor authentication. If you're trying to check the boxes here when it comes to the finer details of financial organization, we want to get you a copy of this article. If you want to get a copy of the article, just email us at info@howardbailey.com. We'll get you signed up for weekend reading. We'll send you out a copy of this article as well. And maybe you need a little assistance. If you're looking for assistance, maybe you got a few grocery bags full of statements and documents and you aren't sure what to do with this or that, shred, store, just bring them into us. We'll help you get organized. That's what we're here for, because I believe without organization, you're never going to have the secure and independent retirement that you deserve. 866-482-9559, 866-482-9559. Give us a call right now for a complimentary financial review. Meet with an advisor on our team, either in person, through a video meeting, from the comfort of your home, and we'll help you determine how prepared you are to handle everything retirement has to throw at you: stock market crashes, rising taxes, and so much more. In short, we'll take the guesswork out of financial planning for you. So give us a call right now or text CONSULT to 866-482-9559, 866-482-9559. We'll be right back next week, right here on Retire with Purpose.
First-time callers are eligible to receive one in-stock book per request. Limit one book per week per household, up to 3 books per calendar year. See full terms at howardbailey.com/terms. You've been listening to Retire with Purpose, hosted by Casey Weade and Marshall Johnson. Investment advisory services offered through Howard Bailey Securities, LLC, a registered investment advisor. Working with Howard Bailey Securities, LLC cannot guarantee investment success or that specific financial goals will be achieved. Certified Financial Planner Board of Standards, Inc. owns the certification mark CFP and Certified Financial Planner in the U.S., which it awards to individuals who successfully complete CFP Board's initial and ongoing certification requirements. Howard Bailey Financial is a registered trademark of Howard Bailey Financial. All rights reserved. Information is not intended to provide specific legal or tax advice. Howard Bailey Financial nor its advisors are qualified to give tax or legal advice. You are encouraged to consult with your tax or legal professional for guidance on your individual situation. This radio show is a paid placement.